guys, Macca here, and welcome to another special episode. This time, I'm taking a look at the proverbial clusterfuck that is the Tyranids. Recently, I did a video on the Chaos Space Marines, and all the flaws that I deem they still have in Chaos Space Marines, what broke the fans. Here today, we're going to be doing a Tyranid version of that. I'm briefly going to run through the history of them from the game standpoint, and then into a bit of a general brief on the specific problems facing the players today. So strap in, or strap on, and let's go. Oh, and just a word of warning, I'm not really a Nid player. I haven't owned a Nid army in a while now. I did own them in earlier editions, but I still have many friends who play Tyranids. I'm still really quite into it, and let's see where we go. So, where it all began was here in the 2nd edition Codex. This bad boy was released not too long after the movie Alien 3, an underrated movie that at the time was critically panned but has since gained a bit of a cult following. What? Why is this important? Well, to be honest, it was what spawned the Tyranids as we know them now. You see, gene stealers were a thing from the original Space Hulk in 2nd edition, but the newly forming Tyranids were literally a H.R. Geiger ripoff, with the Hormgaunts being the most flagrant example. Anyway, the Steelers and the Nids got pushed into one another like Play-Doh at around this point in time, and the next thing that came along was the really lovely 3rd edition Codex. Now here is where the Tyranids really got their identity. A lot of fluff was hashed out, they got their first plastic kits, and although many kits were still white metal, as that was all the rage for large monstrous creatures, aka bigger than a marine, at the time. Now, the 3rd edition book, whilst not particularly riveting by today's standards, was at the time quite a good book, pretty well balanced with the Nids being able to turn some really neat tricks. Then along came the 4th edition book, the Tyranids' own version of the Chaos 3.5 Codex. Oh boy, was that a good book. And like with Chaos, the comparison doesn't really stop there. They were actually a very customizable army, with new kits for most of their range, including the Venerable Carnifex, with dozens of bioweapon upgrades available. You could play almost limitless numbers of army variations, with Gene Stealer cults to some degree, led by the powerhouse at the time Broodlord, who was a HQ option. Monster Hammer, with armies led by tyrants and bulk monstrous creatures, and the Carnifex absolutely reigned supreme at the time. The Distraction Carnifex really dominated the scene. I should point out here, for those who don't know, a Distraction Carnifex is a big nasty unit that you only take so that the other guy shits himself or herself, and they dump all their DACA into it, right? Which allows your other more important units to go along unmolested. Because the Carnifex was the typical unit that did this, that's where the term Distraction Carnifex comes from. I think sites like 1D4chan reference it and things like that. Absolutely awesome concept. I still use it in a lot of my armies today. You throw out a big nasty unit, often it's just intimidating, something like a Land Raider. People just go, oh, I've got to kill it, I've got to kill it. Usually dumb people, right? Not tournament players. And they focus on killing that one unit when they let the nasty shit slip by. Anyway, enough of that. So, as you can see, 4th edition had a lot of flavour, a lot of variety, was super competitive. People really enjoyed it. Next thing that happened, though, was the 5th edition. Oh, and just like Chaos, how the mighty hath fallen. The Codex got the go fuck yourself treatment that the more undesirable codexes have now grown to be very familiar with, aka Chaos Sisters, Orcs, and of course Nids. Everything was dumbed down, with Synapse becoming a quagmire and the builds starting to all coalesce into a single blurry image, an image of the doom of Malantai and a mycetic spore and mass Tervigons. The Codex became a literal joke. Tyranids seemed good on the outside. They had all these lovely new kits, some pretty good stat lines, a lot of, toughness 6, strength 6, 6s across the board. But unfortunately, they kind of played like arse outside of a few token builds. Poor players with dozens of beloved carnifexes had to basically throw them in the bin because they were useless. They were the greatest victim of the rape by Games Workshop. At this point in time, I'm just going to briefly shut up for a moment and display a little definition of rape here, because usually some retarded hippie in the peanut gallery likes to pop up and say, they're a rape victim or whatever, and I'm triggering them. No, the word has multiple uses. Only one of them has to do with sexually raping a person. So anyway, moving on. The era of dull had now begun. Now, 6th edition came on strong, right? We'd had Chaos Space Marines, we'd had Dark Angels, and also Demons. None of those 3 codexes was real powerhouse. They kept the balance pretty even between them. There were some, of course, broken things that could be done, but otherwise were pretty balanced. Then, of course, next came Tau Eldar and Space Marines, who all went, go fuck yourself. And if you're a NID player, you're getting pretty excited at this time. There was a lot of rumours on sites like Spiky Bits and Bell of Lost Souls that you were going to be the next powerful codex. You were going to return to the glory days, just like you saw the Eldar and Tau dexes do before you. Marines, of course, not needing to ever feel like they were lacking in any power in any edition, right? But, of course, with a sly laugh, possibly a cackle, Games Workshop released the 6th edition book. And as a good mate Luke said, where the fuck have half my units gone? Well, Games Workshop was in the middle of the nasty aftermath of the Chapter House lawsuit, and anything they couldn't IP own, anything they couldn't just absolutely lock down tight as their IP, they just outright deleted it from their codex. Now, with most of the special characters and the Mycetic Spore having gone the way of Warhammer Fantasy, you can imagine how pissed off the players were. The codex itself was a shamble on release, with units unable to use more than the most rudimentary of psychic powers, that is to say, only the terrible ones in their own codex. At the same time, Synapse somehow became worse. Already it was bad enough with Tyranids in 5th edition onwards, sort of mainly focused around a single bubble of character units. Now, Tyranids that straight outside the Synapse bubble just became absolutely useless. At this point, I'd like to say, don't get too discouraged, because there were some new releases down the line. Mostly terrible releases, but new anyway, and some of them did help to fix some of the butthurt being felt. The Tyrannocyte was the spiritual successor to the Mycetic Spore, with a kick-ass set of rules at a price. The flying monstrous creatures changes between 6th and 7th also made the Fly Tyrant even better. Well, actually, that's kind of it. Most of the other units kind of suck. You see, much like the Tyranid 5th edition codex, the Chaos Space Marine 6th edition codex, the Orc codex, the 7th edition NIDS is being propped up by very few units. I like to dub this phenomenon the generification complex, where the worst codexes seem to develop seemingly identical army lists in seeming isolation from one another. This process of generification means that the lists all seem to conform to a standard pattern, with Chaos, for example, being mostly made up of cultists, obliterators, and helldrakes. Tyranids themselves, I seem to see an awful lot of hive tyrants and tyrannocytes, with some random Lictor builds thrown in there at tournaments where the players are just, actively going out of their way to abuse the fine print in the basic rulebook to win matches. Because, abusing Games Workshop's fine print's so hard. All the power to them. They want to win with Tyranids, and tournament players, they like to straddle the fine line of rules. Now, the situation, similarly to Chaos, is thus as follows over the last 6 editions that NIDS have been involved with. The early army identity development. So, this was 2nd edition, what happened, right? The army came to get its own identity, right? Combination of different units came together to form the first codex. 3rd edition gave them early competitiveness with other codexes. 4th edition gave them competitiveness still and massive customizability. This was great, you know. You'd see all manner of different Tyranid armies. Some were flying, some were on foot, some were hordes, some were monster heavy. It was a fantastic time to be in the hobby for NID players. 5th edition brought the loss of competitiveness and customizability. With the dumbing down of codexes at the time, they basically copped the short end of the stick. Same as a lot of other codexes did, like Space Marines. 6th edition brought us the basic breakdown of the army's cohesiveness due to the terrible synapse restrictions, loss of psychic powers, things like that. 7th edition finally brought back some level of competitiveness, even if it is just a generic build focusing on very few units, so take it with a pinch of salt. As you can see, Tyranid players at this point have been suffering setbacks ever since 5th edition. It has led to increasing resentment towards Games Workshop and towards their fellow hobbyists. Why their fellow hobbyists? Well, you kind of had to be a NID player to understand. See, to put it simply, they have to spend a lot more money than you to buy their army. You know, more than even guard players. They have to spend a very long time painting it as well, due to the massive numbers and the detailed nature of the miniatures. Flesh is a lot harder to paint than tanks. I can assure you of that. I've painted fuck tons of each over the last 20 odd years. You know, they've done a lot of these units only to have them shit on by some 12-year-old scrub with a scrub formation from his Marine Codex. How would you feel if you were a player who, every time you took the army, you've just absolutely thrown all your love into, you know, a nice balanced list as well, you know, fluffy, all that. You know, it's not weak, it's what you think is strong for your codex. And then some dickhead just comes in and goes, yeah, here's my Marine formation, I've got 5 extra 100 points of vehicles, and yeah, you know, fucking daddy's money, and they kick your ass. You're going to be pretty pissed off. You're not going to want to keep collecting NIDs. You're probably not even going to want to stick with the hobby. I know a lot of NID players who've just put them on the shelf and said, fuck it, I'll come back if they ever fix it. And they've left the hobby completely. You know, they're off playing games like Flames of War. Yes, NIDs can compete, but they're doing it with a handicap. And people don't want handicaps. They want balance. They want to represent their army, and they want to theme it a certain way. Perfect balance is off the table, but comparative balance, it's doable. If I was Games Workshop, I'd just aim to give them that. Give the Tyranid players comparative balance. Let them compete with other codexes, taking units outside of flying hive tyrants with ridiculous flying rules and Tyranids providing their bulk synapse. You will see their hobby change. I've kept the video short and sweet. I don't want to reiterate too many of the points I've already covered with Chaos. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who watches our videos, has liked us, subscribed to us. It encourages us to do a lot more of these videos, and we love the feedback from you guys. Where we can in our scrub downs, we even try and talk to a few people directly, you know, answer their questions verbally or their responses verbally in our videos. And we really appreciate it, guys. You know, this is free content, and yeah. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.